There's a story that bears repeating, I've told you before, about the southern governor who was touring one of his state prisons. And he decided to interview some of the inmates one by one, and each one of them said, "Governor, you know, you got the power to let me out of here. I was framed. Someone set me up, and someone else helped me get arrested, and I didn't do it." And, of course, they all thought he could intervene and perhaps get them out of prison. And at the last, there was one inmate who was embarrassed to meet the governor under those conditions, and he admitted, I deserve to be here, and I'm sorry, I got no excuse. And the governor told the warden, "I want that man locked up in solitary confinement. He don't belong out in the yard with all of those honest men." See, it's always something, that's not a very good southern drawl, but you get my point. It's always somebody else's fault. You're always innocent. Everybody else is to blame for the problem you have. No one's guilty today. It's the fault of someone else. Charismatics like to blame the devil for every time they stumble spiritually. Contemporary evangelical Christianity blames their poor childhood or a dysfunctional family, or whatever other pop psychological term they can use for their spiritual weaknesses. Our text today tells us where so much misery, so much pain, so much agony, so much disappointment in the world comes from. It's said to be the works of the flesh, and so I've entitled this brief outline, "It's not the devil's fault." It's not the devil's fault. This is a rerun. You've heard it before, but reruns are sometimes fun to watch anyway. The first point I want you to consider today is your flesh has a problem, buddy. Exclamation point on the end of that. Your flesh has a problem, buddy. Look at verse 17 in our text. "For the flesh lusteth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. These are contrary the one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would." Your flesh has a problem, buddy. And there's war raging inside of you. Paul writes in Romans 7, verse 23, "But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members, and in my hands, my feet, my body." The different components of my flesh. He said in Romans 7, verse 18, "For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For to will is present with me." I want to do what's right. "But how to perform that which is good, I find not." No, you want to spend more time reading your Bible, but, the newspaper gets delivered every morning, and gosh, if I don't read it, then I feel like I'm paying for it for nothing, so I'll read the paper, and the Bible gets put on hold. You intend to spend more time in prayer. You say, "I'm going to start waking up early and get alone with God before the day gets underway." But doggone it, Rush Limbaugh comes on at 9 o'clock, and I waited too long, and I want to listen to him, and so prayer gets put on hold. You see, spiritual neglect isn't just something liberals engage in. Conservatives do too. I like Rush Limbaugh, by the way. Rush Limbaugh last week, he said, the problem with American life and our culture is because we have forgotten God. He said stronger words on his radio show than a lot of preachers say. But you have every intention of being honest with everyone you meet. You start out the day, have you ever started out the day saying, "I'm going to see if I can be honest in every dealing I have with every person I meet"? You go to the gas station, you put gas in your car. There's always that bum there. It's always panhandling, Everyone's been hit up by those guys at one time or another. And rather than say, "Listen, I really have my doubts about what you're telling me, so I'm going to tell you no." No, you make up some excuse. "Well, I don't have anything on me right now." See, you've broken your own, you violated your own rule before the day is even underway. Or you are shady in the time you put on your time card, or the amount you spend at lunchtime. You're less than honest when it comes to that. You call in sick to the boss. "I can't make it today. I think maybe this thing will be better by tomorrow," but that's because you had plans to go somewhere with someone that day. You love your husband. You love your wife. They don't deny it. They don't doubt that. And yet you find yourself flirting with the waitress at the restaurant. You're flirting with the cashier at the grocery store. And ladies do it too. You ladies, you know how to attract a man's attention, get his interest. Men are suckers for it too, and you know that. But there's the pull and the force of sin at work inside of you, and it's every bit as strong as your desire to overcome it and to find victory over sin and temptation. Romans 7 verse 19 says, "For the good that I would, I do not. But the evil which I would not, that I do." Paul said, I can't understand it. I don't know why it happens. I want to do good, and I find myself doing bad. And the bad that I really don't want to engage in, I find myself yielding to and giving into. Yeah, actually, it's almost a comforting thing to know that the Apostle Paul, probably the greatest Christian that ever lived, has had the same struggles in his flesh that you do. Now, I'll grant you the fleshly temptations that a 95-year-old man encounters might not be the same as a 25-year-old man. But whatever kind of temptation comes along, anything that causes you to abandon your walk with Christ, or to become wax cold and indifferent to the spiritual things of your life, that is a weakness in the flesh. Your flesh, even if you're a Christian, has a problem. And it's the problem of sin that dwells within your flesh, in your members, your hands, your feet, your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your nose. Have you ever had a dream and woken up thinking, I can't believe I dreamt that. And gosh, I'm glad my wife can't read my thoughts. I'm glad my husband can't read my mind. He'd know what I was dreaming about. I've woken up wondering if God's going to hold me accountable for the dreams I have when I'm asleep. If you've never asked yourself whether you're going to give an account for that, then maybe you're not as spiritually minded as you could be. Because it behooves every Christian to take his life, his thoughts, his actions, even when he's asleep, seriously before God. You don't know. Maybe there's some sin in your life that has triggered the dreams that you have when you're asleep at night. The second thing I want you to consider today is this point. Don't blame it on somebody else. That's the second thing I want to say. Don't blame it on somebody else. Paul writes that the works of the flesh are manifest. That is, they're out in the open. They're undeniable. And then he mentions a few. Verse 19. Adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone who thought those were good qualities, those were good virtues that every society ought to encourage. And everyone in the world would say those are things we don't want to encourage. And yet everywhere in the world you'll find people engaging in them. Don't ask me why. It's the strange mystery of the world, is that the things that virtually everyone agrees are undesirable are the things that they can't control. The things they cannot eliminate and eradicate. But just as universally condemned as those things are, you'll find people all over the world seeking them, engaging in them, trying to promote them, trying to secretly get away with them. And it's because of the lust that dwells within your members. You don't just blame it on somebody else. Jeffrey Dahmer was a murderer and cannibalized 17 people back in Wisconsin. In the late 80s, early 90s. And when they finally arrested him, and he was found guilty of 17 murders and was sentenced to prison. Of course, the state of Wisconsin had already gotten rid of the death penalty. So the worst they could give him, I think, was 600 years. And an inmate in prison eventually murdered him. So, saved the taxpayer a lot of money. But Stone Phillips interviewed Jeffrey Dahmer and his father, NBC Dateline. And Dahmer's father suggested in a book that perhaps some medication his mother had taken when she was expecting him had caused him to be born with a psychological damage. Something that triggered this action in him, this secret homosexuality and murder and so on. And Stone Phillips said, "What do you think, Jeffrey, your father's theory?" And Jeffrey Dahmer, you can find this whole interview on YouTube. And Jeffrey Dahmer said, "I think it's wrong to shift blame onto other people I says, I take responsibility for my actions alone. There's one inmate and some guy came along and murdered him. That was honest. Well, anyway, don't blame other people. You're responsible for it. James 1, verses 13 through 15 say, let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted.